On August 19th, 1986, Patrick Sherrill was having a bad day. A United States postal worker in Edmond, Oklahoma, he'd been taken aside by two supervisors to talk about his performance. Some say he was an unreliable employee, while others claimed he was just being picked on. Regardless, he had a bad relationship with management. The talking to was about his attitude and aptitude, and it ended with the threat of his release. Sherrill was a relief worker who picked up others' routes on an unpredictable schedule. Not being dedicated to a particular area or route made him more replaceable, and the possibility of firing was all too real at the best of times. On August 20th, Patrick Sherrill had a bad day. But he wasn't the only one. He arrived at the office, mailbag slung under his arm. Unbeknownst to his coworkers, he had stashed 3 automatic pistols and a pile of ammunition inside. Just after 7 a.m., he opened fire, first killing one of the supervisors from the previous day. The other one had overslept and was late, so when he failed to find them, he turned his gun on the rest of the office. In the span of 15 minutes, Sherrill killed 14 people and wounded 6. Police camped outside the facility as panicked workers fled through back doors and side entrances. By the time they stormed inside, Sherrill was slumped on the floor, dead from a self-inflicted gunshot wound to the forehead. Years later, in 1993, the St. Petersburg Times would run a story about workplace violence. The U.S. Postal Service has seen so many outbursts that in some circles, excessive stress is known as going postal. You can support me on Patreon for as little as $1 a month. From the moment you boot it up, 1997's Postal is an assault. The soundtrack is made of dissonant, industrial screeching. The modern world groans and rusts, the menu's tattered, blood-stained paper. You start a new game and are presented with the first of the game's title cards, written like journal entries. Home. The earth is hungry. Its heart throbs and demands cleansing. The earth is also thirsty. In the background, screws and wiring, worn metal, indistinguishable from packed clay, an open, screaming mouth. It shimmers and wavers. The gameplay of Postal is simple. Each level is a top-down area filled with hostiles and innocents. You're tasked with killing a certain percentage of hostiles before advancing to the next level, which is done by pressing F1 for some reason.
Cool.
Guns are pretty standard fare. You can feel the inspiration from Doom and similar 90s shooters. Infinite automatic weapon, shotgun, rocket launcher. There's a few handheld explosives like a Molotov cocktail and grenades, as well as mines. Enemies are armed with the same weaponry as you, making for slight deviations in how you fight them, though it usually comes down to how often you need to take cover. Mouse over enemy, click, and kill. Postal is as subtle as a knife to the gut. It is, first and foremost, a mass murder simulator. That's one of the only ways I can find to end that sentence, because it's what's literally on screen. What I first find gripping about the game isn't the violence, the dark humor, or the moans of dying innocents caught in the crossfire. No, it's the lack of anything around that. You, the player, are dropped into a situation you know nothing about and have no investment in, but your character is very motivated, for reasons you can't comprehend. At surface level, he seems to enjoy it, making sarcastic quips.
Oh, did that hurt?
Even though your goal is to kill armed hostiles, he has specific taunts for the dying innocents he happens to score.
Sissy.
That is, before you execute them with the dedicated button. The game's visual style remains unique even today. It uses 2D backgrounds hand-drawn by artist Randy Briley, but characters are 3D models. This mismatched aesthetic makes them feel alien from their environment, fundamentally different. The interstitial title cards are often photo-bashed and heavily edited with warm color filters that evoke hell. Each one has a drunken, distorted effect, as if your perception is altered. Everything visually in the game feels off and disjointed. The soundscape is minimal. Soundtrack only appears between levels, and the levels themselves are nothing but ambience and the sound of gunfire, voices crying out. Without context, you are left to fill in the silence. At one point in my playthrough, a glitch caused a character's dying voice line to be looped infinitely. Their plea for help grew louder and louder, ringing in my ears as I mowed down more people, becoming almost unbearable until... On to the next one. The further you progress through the game's 16 levels, the more of these demented journal entries you read. The writer here is gleeful, bloodthirsty. Some choice quotes.
Black leather smoke coils up my nostrils, tingling with death's surprise. Human remnants cling to my clothing like bloody briars as I continue to wade, hip-deep in flesh, bone, and viscera. Bad neighborhood coming up. Life is cheap, death is free. Act now, supplies are limited, offer void in Arizona. I will don the eviscerated organs of my enemies as party hats. Wear their shredded entrails as neckties, and oh, how I shall dance. I am the celestial gardener, policing the planet of the stinkweeds and poisons which leak out even through the cracks in the cold asphalt sidewalks of the city of sin.
You massacre your way through neighborhoods, construction sites, train stations, and public parks. One of the game's most memorable moments is Level 4, Parade of Disasters. The postal dude crouches in an alleyway, watching a parade march through town. And for a moment, even the most pearl-clutching, sensitive, think-of-the-children player gets a little spark of inspiration. That's the power of Postal's minimalism. Engaging with it makes you a hermit crab, filling the shell with yourself. Video games are a special medium because dialogue with them is always two ways. Eventually, you make your way to the self-proclaimed climax, the Air Force Base. Sirens blare, enemies pour from buildings, rockets fly. You pick apart the base, ripping through more people than ever. There are no innocents. Hit the goal and mash F1. What could possibly be next?
The elementary school. The hive has been cleansed. The source of the corruption has been corked, laid in a body bag, and dragged to the outskirts of existence.
The protagonist fires away at the children, but his flames pass right through them, his bullets disappearing against their hazy forms. Hazy, getting hazier.
The stress of modern life may cause an increase in violent tendencies. The urban environment is the incubator for all sorts of undesirable behaviors. However much his atrocities disgust us, he may actually consider himself a hero. This is common among those who, in popular slang, go postal. In his tortured mind, he may feel that he's backing against impossible odds. It is not unusual for such individuals to believe that the entire fate of the world rests with them. In the end, our subject displayed all the classic symptoms of paranoid delusion. We may never know exactly what set him off, but rest assured we will have plenty of time to study him.
Postal's developer, Running with Scissors, was founded in 1997 by Vince Desi and Mike Rydell. For the last few years, the two of them had run another development studio called Rydell Software Productions, creating edutainment and licensed games for properties like Sesame Street, Looney Tunes, and Wishbone. They'd grown tired of this rigmarole and wanted an outlet for more adult work, so Running with Scissors was born. Named such because it symbolized, quote, doing the exact opposite of what you're told, taking risks and not listening to the standard bullshit.
Vince, the kids! Gotta think of the kids!
Look at the quality of this video! You want enough!
In interviews, you'll find that they have much more to talk about in regards to Postal 2. That was a big break for them, and represented an equally large tonal shift. Postal 2 was a full-on black and blue comedy that cranked the absurdity up to 11. While Desi might see both games as being comedic in nature, Postal has a distinct mood and intent. The game itself provides minimal context, and if that's all you need, it serves as a brief dive into the shoes of a mass killer. The simplicity is enough. But if you choose to look just outside the disc, you'll find that there's a decent amount of material supplied around it. The back of the box gives us a clue. Welcome to Paradise, Arizona. They're out to get you, or are they? It doesn't matter, you don't have time to think, only time to kill. Buried within the manual is a level-by-level guide. Instead of a strategy guide, it's presented as a series of diary entries. Not the ones seen on the loading screens, but ones written by what seems like a totally different character. The first entry, House, offers the next clue. Quote, moving to Paradise was a tragic mistake. People here are sick. I hear gunshots, screams after dark. Now the phone calls saying I'm being thrown out of this house, my house. Wearing Kevlar vest and carrying a sidearm at all times now. Level 2. Worst fears confirmed. Group of lunatics tried to invade my home. Level 3. Like animals, even the sheriff. Everyone here is infected with something. Something in the air or water. Don't know. Maybe from Air Force Base? Level 4. Must face the possibility that I am only uninfected person in Paradise. Air Force must napalm entire town. At level 5, the diary becomes the war journal. It's war now. That parade of murderous maniacs marching down the middle of Main Street was sobering. Everyone here is mad. Sick. From here, the entries depict the dude's thoughts in the interim of each level. He grows paranoid that he's infected himself. He grows tired and frantic, pushed forward by his new goal of getting to the root of this mad tree. They are so dramatically different from the loading screens that it's like they're different characters, while the red persona is completely disconnected from reality. The war journal depicts someone who's more afraid than anything. The game begins with him feeling paranoid of his surroundings, suddenly evicted from his home. To his understanding, a violent mob tried to enter his house, and he was simply acting in self-defense. The entry I find most interesting is level 5's, where he reflects on the parade. The parade is entirely made of innocents, but to the war journal, they're murderous maniacs. This is the moment that crystallizes his goal. He calls it sobering. At this point, we're forced to ask, what version of events is true? What's seen in-game, or what's described in the journal? If the game is accurate, then there really are roving gangs of armed madmen who are out to kill one guy before he's even done anything. to our knowledge. If the journal is to be believed, then the parade in-game is actually a procession of violent maniacs and aren't innocent at all. Is it possible that both are true at different points? When enemies shoot at us, is that actually happening? Is this law enforcement armed citizens? The elementary school has no entry in the journal. Every child he sees is just an illusion. It's questionable if this even happens, but emotionally, it's real. Did he find what he was looking for at the Air Force Base? It's unclear. Does he care anymore? For reasons unknown to us, he presses on. Just as control has been taken from the player, the postal dude fires hopelessly into the children, squeezing the trigger until his break from reality is so powerful that he loses himself completely. Unreliable narration isn't employed very often in the modern day, even less so in video games, but Postal pulls off something pretty interesting. By supplying us with conflicting information outside the text, it creates a sliding sense of reality. The game itself can be taken 100% literally, with the exception of the school. As you bring in more and more of the external material, doubt creeps into the world. What starts as a mindless mass murder simulator becomes a portrait of someone driven to their breaking point. You choose to believe as much as you want. Your perception of the game's events are as fractured as the protagonists. The same year Postal released, 1997, there were 2 more post office shootings. Both ended in suicides. For over a decade, there was a pattern. Postal worker, current or former, often a military vet, often a diagnosed mental illness. Goes to the office, shoots it up, suicide. In 1998, Congress ordered a joint hearing and analysis to find out what the hell was happening at the USPS. They found a disproportionate amount of violence. While only 1% of the workforce served the post office, 13% of workplace homicides were committed by current or former employees at postal facilities. 1970's Postal Reorganization Act formed the modern USPS and mandated that by the 1980s, it would stop receiving government funding, instead relying entirely on customer revenue. This put workers in the worst of both worlds. They were expected to serve the entire country like a public service, but lacked public funding. This pressure to perform spawned a culture of micromanaging and harsh discipline. Workers recount management bullying them, in some cases threatening physical violence and even being rewarded for being tough on employees or firing them. By the 90s, technology was beginning to outpace flesh and blood humans, leading to even less job security. As a government service, the USPS is incentivized to hire from traditionally overlooked groups. Of note here are veterans and the mentally ill. It's unfair to stereotype these people as inherently violent or dangerous. It's also unfair to put people with firearms training, mental instability, and possible PTSD into pressure cooker work environments where they're harassed, bullied, and threatened with violence. The pseudo-privatization of the Postal Service created disasters waiting to happen. It was never going to get better without major structural changes.
And they can look sweet, and you can do this and you can do that, but you can't wipe out blood with sugar. You know, it's just not a thing that happens. You can't cover up what's happened with flowers.
I don't think the original Postal could have been made after 9/11. By the time it released, American society was on an upwards trajectory. Economically, we were seeing the longest expansion in our history. New technology was connecting people to a bright, optimistic future. Violent crime had been on a decades-long decline. In 1992, political scientist Francis Fukuyama published The End of History and the Last Man, which posited that Western liberal democracy, the capitalist democracy, was the ultimate form of governance. Over time, he predicted that it would spread throughout the world, not by force, but political Darwinism, the clear victor against all other ideologies. This would bring with it a state of society where no further developments could be made, no better system proposed, an end to politics, the end of history. While most Americans probably weren't familiar with his writing, this idea would take over the cultural subconscious as we drifted closer to universal normalcy. The workforce industrialized and privatized. It moved into cubicles and office buildings. There was a feeling lurking below that we were reaching a peak, a perfection that brought with it stagnation, and with stagnation, angst, unrest, a self-destructive equilibrium. This is the era of Falling Down, Fight Club, The Matrix, even comedies like Office Space. Art that depicted people slowly boiling in the cubicle pot, lashing out in cathartic violence, escaping a world that just felt too calculated and machine-like.
Most people probably don't listen to the lyrics, but they should, because it's not just about the pleasures of conformity and the importance of trends, it's also a personal statement about the band itself. Hey, Paul!
This fragile American perspective was shattered by the 9/11 attacks, and the struggle of normalcy versus cathartic backlash was replaced by a desperate clinging to normalcy in a chaotic world. Gone were the days of ripping the roof off our values. More people wanted to cower underneath. Postal 1 revels in that former period of repressed social angst. It delights in how countercultural it is, how unspeakable the player can become. It preempts its own backlash by placing a crowd of protesters outside the Running with Scissors office, which you can, of course, mow down with impunity. This is why I believe the following games took such a different approach. The humor is so excessive because now the main character is the very real chaos that Americans felt after 9/11. He's no longer the madness lurking just out of sight, but the horrifying mania outside. It even structures itself as a series of larger, open hubs, as if to drive this home. It's just everywhere. The whole world gone mad. The game's commentary is so distinct that this dude isn't even canonically the same character as the original. We don't know much about the Postal dude. You might think he's a gleefully cruel murderer from his voice lines, but this isn't his voice. Examining the level editor, you'll find an object called Demon, whose only function is to play the voice lines of the main character. Listen to these with that in mind.
Only you can stop the evil. Only my weapon understands me.
There's a voice line that plays when the dude catches fire. This is the only one not to come from the demon. The funny thing about Postal is that the more you dig into it, the less you can be sure of. There's much more I could go over. An unreleased book, developer interviews, marketing materials, it goes on and on. Researching for this video took me down an ever-deepening rabbit hole where each piece of information filled in gaps only to create new ones. You can get lost in the sheer overload of reality. So I'll hone in on the one thing that I feel certain of. One moment in time. The back of the box includes a distorted image. Let's see the original. Now, in the negative. This is the Postal dude. In a moment never depicted in-game, huddled in a corner, clutching his rifle like a security blanket, arms crossed defensively, his gaze leading off frame. What is he looking at? Anything at all? Spent shells litter the floor. Uncertainty riddles his face. He's scared and alone. A cowering animal. The amount of effort put into creating a world just out of sight is impressive for a game whose own developers often simplified it down to just focus on the gameplay. Postal is what you make of it. The further you pull back the canvas, the greater the negative space. It invites you to fill it in yourself, to decide what you believe, to have a vision of apocalypse or grandeur, because the postal dude is just that. Not a named character, not anyone from any particular background, not living in any real city. He might have a normal job, like a postman. Thank you to my patrons who keep this channel free. $10 a month patrons get access to exclusive commentary tracks for these videos. You can also listen to my podcast and support me on Ko-fi. Bye. You don't think I look like...
Here comes a daredevil! Game over!